In our day-to-day lives, we tend to be overly focused on what is right in front of us. We've got our to-do lists, our call schedules, our tasks, and our projects. With the exception of quiet time, perhaps during lunch or late in the evening, the pace of our lives is so fast, we never have the luxury to take a breath and actually look at the big picture. Technology has made getting away from it all the more challenging. With smartphones, we're always connected, responding to the crisis of the moment, the client who's upset, the order that wasn't filled, and the staffer who didn't show up. And that's just our work lives. The pace with which we operate continues when we get home. Have you noticed that you're receiving more emails than ever at 5 in the morning, 11 at night, 2 in the morning? And you're probably returning many of them when you receive them. The result is that we rarely have a chance to take a step back and see the trends unfolding right in front of us. We are so focused on the here and now that we aren't able to recognize the larger patterns that are forming, thus missing the opportunity to connect the dots. This morning, you're going to meet someone who has that luxury, and she's really good at it. Cary Tilds is the Chief Innovation Officer of GROUPM, where she is responsible for leading the identification of consumer technologies and assessment of how these technologies change the digital media platform strategy. In other words, Cary is the ultimate big picture thinker.
Well, let's hear a little bit about the company that Cary works. Cary works for GROUPM. It's the largest media investment management company and media agency holding company in the world. Their holdings include Maxis, a global network of local advertising agencies located in 55 markets, whose clients include Fiat, Barclays, NBC Universal, and my favorite, L'Oreal. At a certain age, honey, you'll know that. At MEC, they also own MEC, which works with brands in 93 countries and is committed to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in order to thrive with brand partnerships, mobile, search, social media, cause marketing, and more. Also, they own Mediacom, and Mediacom describes itself as the content plus connection agency. Their focus is on their unique way of buying across paid, owned, and earned media to optimize their clients' entire system of content and connections. Mindshare is another one, and that is a global agency created to turn the old ways of thinking about advertising agencies on its head. With over 100 offices worldwide, Mindshare provides creative thinking for brands such as Ford, HSBC, Nike, and Rolex. Cary Tilds is the person who is in charge who has been charged with leading the company in identifying, evaluating, and creating roadmap development to digital media platforms and technologies, those current and those emerging in the future. That best enables Group W to be a power user of search, social, mobile, and emerging digital technologies, often referred to as tech stack. Prior to joining GROUPM, Cary worked as leader of digital media operations for Mindshare North America, Unilever North America, focusing on macro digital strategies, and for several other leading advertising agencies, including right here in Detroit, the Team Detroit, which is renowned, and company PhD. Cary has a BA from the University of Michigan and her MBA right here from Wayne State University. She lives in the Detroit metropolitan area, and we are so proud to have her here with us today with all of her accomplishments to show us her visions as she keynotes this presentation at DASH. Cary?
Cool. Thank you so much, and I hope you can see me, because I can see you, so I think we're good there. And thank you so much for that kind introduction. I don't think I've ever had anybody give me such a kind introduction before, so I feel like I'm blushing already. Paul and Fred thought it would be a good idea if I explained who I was, aside from that lovely introduction, a bit about my listening habits. So I'm going to go through my listening habits to just describe a bit about me. The first thing I might do in the morning is actually listen to Blaine and Allison. I've listened to them for a long time on WDVD. I don't have drive time, though. My office is actually in New York. I live here, but I don't commute to New York. I'm pretty blessed. I travel quite a bit, but then when I'm not on a plane, I work from home. So my Blaine and Allison comes across streaming. I don't own a terrestrial radio, actually. And so sometimes I'll have drive time, but that's actually what I mean is walking down the hall, streaming over a Sonos player in my ceiling. And so when I'm not listening to Blaine and Allison, I typically don't listen to them all day long. I'll listen to Spotify if I'm going on a run with my curated lists. And if I have parties, I'll use Spotify. And then if I want background music, I definitely use Pandora. And the only thing that changes about that is when I cheat on Blaine and Allison, and for those of you who might be in the Detroit metro area, I completely tune them out when WNIC starts their Christmas music. And I secretly cheat on the fact that I shouldn't be listening to it before December because they start in November, and I'm super thankful. So if anybody is affiliated with that station, keep it up because I love it. So that's a little bit about me and my listening habits. But that's not what you came here to hear. So let's get started. And before I begin, just thankful again for not only Radio Inc. and SCG, but also Paul and Fred. I just find them very lovely people and highly intelligent, and I'm feeling pretty blessed to meet them. So I just wanted to thank them for that. So what does advertising on the next billion devices look like? And that's really what we're here to talk about. I really have one of the funnest jobs in the world, getting to look at new trends and opportunities in the marketplace. And in doing that, there's kind of a chasm that we're crossing. Clearly, technology is changing the way that consumers interact with our messages in media. And so messaging on the next billion devices will look very different than messaging, or how we get messaging on those devices will look very different than how we get messaging on the first billion devices. And so the fact that the first billion or more was developed with the fact that we have standards. So standards have grown that scale in my world in media messaging. So standards like 15s, 30s, 60s, 90s, 300 by 250, 468 by 90 in the display. Those standards have actually helped develop that scale in the messaging on those devices. But that's in fact not what's going to drive that next billion or 10 billion as in the chart that was shown yesterday. So, however, to quote that phrase, what got us here won't get us there, that's the premise of this discussion this morning. And so there's several areas where this fact is even more pronounced than others. Non-standard formats actually will continue to rise. We're dealing with that at this conference today, and we're dealing with that in other areas as well. And those are the kinds of trends that I'll talk about. I'll weave in the fact that non-standard will actually be the standard, and we'll have to rethink our approach to our thinking in terms of messaging on these devices in the following areas, whether that be smartphones meet telematics, which is where we're here today, the gamification of everything, location fueling the Internet of Things, or now it's evolved to the Internet of Everything, and the rise of the cognitive interface, which is a pretty fun topic that I'll end with. And although one could argue that each of the newly developed channels that I've shown here or that we've come across in our world, our daily lives, whether that be consumer or professional, have developed standards in messaging, one would argue that the speed at which those standards have developed hasn't kept up with the consumer demand or adoption of those channels. And so, therefore, we're experiencing a specific point in time where many things are colliding to create an environment for not just a new standard, but a holistic thinking in our system. So each one of these areas is actually happening now. I actually don't mean 25 years from now. I don't even mean 5 years from now. Now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. It's happening now. And so this is a really important point for us to take a look at in terms of how we're embracing these new methodologies for these channels. And so before we look at the trends that I just talked about, I want to base the conversation actually in the messaging approach that will be common among all of them. And it's something that you may not be aware of or may not have considered. And this approach actually is driven by social media, in fact, but don't get caught up in the social media, meaning likes and tweets and follows and things like that. I actually mean something a bit deeper. But let's talk first about the trends so we are aware that we've already trained the mass of consumers that are using these devices in these new channels on social media methodologies or thinking. And so 74%, this is a US figure, but it pretty much applies to the entire globe. As of January, 74% of online adults use social media. If you don't know that, you probably aren't using a device of any sort. Mobile, actually, sharing is leading that use case of social media. So here's the point there. The tipping point has absolutely occurred. Not going to occur, it's occurred. And so on these social sites, on these sharing moments, the format is native. And what I mean by native, it's non-standard. It varies. Okay, so that's a really important point. The format is native. And by 2017, native ads will represent 40% or more of the over 10 billion in social media ad spend. So it's not just a philosophy and a framework, there's an actual channel, as we're probably all aware, that's making a significant amount of money. And marketers are getting this, and marketers that I work with are getting this, and they know this is incredibly important, not just for the channel, but for the philosophy as well. And the IAB has started a committee that actually is trying to address the notion of what native means and what standards are. But wait, actually, there's more. If we dig deeper into why this trend really is important, I want to further point out what I actually mean by native and what I mean by rethinking the methodology of messaging on these devices. So we look at ways technology providers are helping decompose locked up ads and recompose those ads. In this example, I'm showing a visual of a display unit, but the same would be true for an audio unit or a video unit as well. And so you can see the decomposition of the raw assets in this example and the recomposition of the assembled ad. Triple Lift, this is from Triple Lift, is such a company that's doing that in the display world. Celtra is another company that can also perform this task. Microsoft, I love Microsoft, but they tried to do this, and perhaps the fact that they called it polymorphic ad scared a whole bunch of people and confused the marketplace a bit and made it a little too complicated. So when we talk about these notions, although I know I'm being complicated purposefully right now, we need to keep things simple. So the notion of decomposing and recomposing ads is a really important notion. So I want to talk about SizzlePig, and I'm not going to show it because it's actually a startup, and they're in the Detroit area. And when you get a chance, and this is your assignment, SizzlePig is a consumer example of this technology where you can upload assets and reconfigure those assets in an app environment. Check it out. That's your homework, and that's my little shout out. Now let's take the notion of the native ad decomposition and recomposition, and let's add something. Let's add something called if this then that. All right, the if this then that is actually a site online. It's a popular coding site, computer programming, and it helps create popular combinations of functions, coding functions. And don't worry, this is as crazy technical as I'm going to get, and I apologize, but it's really important. All right, and what it does is it takes combinations of those coding functions, and it creates a statement. It's called a recipe, just like any other recipe with ingredients. And in this case, the recipe is a trigger and an action. So in this case, think, if I take a picture on Instagram, it'll automatically drop into my Dropbox. Why am I talking about this? Because this is actually how the internet and the app world are growing at faster and faster speeds. And we have to think about this application in our world. How are we going to learn faster leveraging technology? How are we going to create shortcuts? How are we going to have a message fabric using decomposition and recomposition, that native approach, and a mechanism to reach people on not just new screens, but also new functionalities within those screens and application. This is now. It's not our future. It is now. And so let me show you a few examples of what I mean by how you would use some of these things. New screens can range from, in the first example on the top, in-image advertising, which can take many forms. And in this example, the icon denotes more information is available and only shows when a consumer interacts with that, so that's one example. In the second example there, you'll see that's augmented reality. Blipper is a B-L-I-P-P-A-R, is a popular company that does this as well, and actually will show incremental information to you, basically in your eye perception of what's in between the product and the phone, which is wonderful. It can provide you a way to give much more content to the world. And then finally, as we noted earlier, Internet of Things, a description of those connected objects, or everything, is a catch-all of undefined list of devices that are a potential for a brand fabric, requiring unique assets at every turn. This is our present, and this is our future, and we must become masters of leveraging both native advertising approaches and the philosophy of if this, then that triggers and actions, or otherwise recipes, to prepare ourselves for advertising on the next billion devices. So let's jump into some of those trends I talked about to show you where we might apply this. All right, so gamification of everything. Interesting. Gamification of everything certainly is not a new phrase in our world, but gamification of new channels is, and it will continue to be. So I'm not sure if you have children. I have children. He doesn't do this, but many children in my son's grade, which is the 9th grade, do this, which is basically watch people play video games. So 45 million monthly viewers, 106 minutes per day of people watching people play video games. People watching people play video games. And so when I first read that stat, I kind of snickered and thought, that's crazy, until I realized that people watch people play football games. And people watch people play baseball games, and people watch people play hockey games. So this is not necessarily a new trend, but it's a new trend and a new channel. Machinima actually also has the same philosophy. And so this isn't slowing down, actually. In May of 2014, we saw 95% growth in hardware sales year over year. Gaming consoles are here to stay, and they're going to control the living room even more. And gamification in mobile has been hot for a while, but improved local targeting actually is helping to amplify the use of gamifications in stores, in the retail environment. And for these examples to work their best, they require non-standard units, or at least the ones that don't exist today. And so aside from people watching people play video games, which still is crazy, people are also still driving a lot, and we're in the city, Motor City, and I'm proud to say that everywhere I go, by the way. And when they're driving, they have their smartphone in the car, and we talked about that yesterday, and we'll talk about that today. There's 210 million of them, just to remind people of the scale. When I did this speech for Colgate-Palmolive, they were reminded of that too. 37 miles per day. They're in their cars a lot. They're connected already, but they are about to become even more connected. This is a forecast of connected car shipments in 2016. And my perspective, I really appreciated Gary's perspective yesterday on this. I'd never heard his perspective of the connected vehicle and the radio industry, but my perspective on the connected car industry is that it's a brutal race, wrought with walled gardens, tangled technology webs, and a lack of clear standards. And so I'm hoping that this conference, which is what I'm so thrilled to be at, will help sort some of those things out. But the mobile phone for now, because it's simpler and the consumers know how to use that, is winning in the car with 1 in every 5 people connected via the phone listening to the radio, for example. Pandora says 50% of its traffic taking place in the car. And of course, in all that, the same theme applies. Messaging in the car will require native skills. And of course, the car is a location device. That's how I view it, at least. And location technology will actually fuel the Internet of Things. And so here's some key trends to consider here. In-store traffic in some areas is on the decline in some areas, as more ability to purchase online and via mobile increases. However, when surveyed, actually, and this is the really interesting nuance, and this is actually where this industry can dig in and be incredibly meaningful, is that their likeliness to impulse purchase is 40% of the time in store versus 25% of the time on a mobile device. And so if you can help them get to a store and impulse purchase in a store versus online, you can see the clear increase in margin. And apps already are playing a huge part when it comes to in-store, and we talked about gamification of everything. Overall, people are open to new technologies when they're using apps in the shopping experience. Ironically, mobile, which is taking some share away right now of the in-store shopping purchase, will actually help the in-store, fundamentally change the in-store shopping purchase, and to improve that over time with growth. I'm going as fast as I can. It's important to distinguish between local marketing and location. So let me take a quick break on this. Local is the where the business is, the where. Location is the when the person is there. And so we see a few technologies in this area, whether it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but they have significant battery drains. Bite light is actually a light that flashes 1,000 times per second. It can use the camera on your phone to locate you in the store. It has a problem, though, when it's in your pocket or your purse. It doesn't really work. And so the biggest technology that I see will fundamentally change the local and the location-based shopping experiences is BLE. And so if you don't know what BLE is, and if you don't know what a beacon is, here's how it works. It's really just a simple device that can transmit a ping or an ID. That ID has to go to an app in your phone, and the app goes to the cloud and says, this is what it means. And so it's really important in everybody's world to understand this, because you'll need to understand how our messages that we create, no matter what channel it comes from, can also, at the end of the day, help the consumer interact at that zero moment of truth. So that's really important. The most important change, actually, with beacons is when Apple decided that it was going to use BLE as its standard. And what that does is Apple helps create education, awareness, structure in a kind of a chaotic industry, which will have to help grow everybody's risk-averse nature. And so you have to ask yourself, what does this mean for your world as well? How will you dig in? And so who owns a Fitbit? Anyone own a wearable or a Fitbit? A few people. Fitbit already has BLE technology in it, for example. And so more than you know, your world will be connected. And so advertising in new places with beacons will become very easy, whether you're at the airport like we are today and you get a ping on your phone saying, I know you're near your gate. There's a restaurant 2 stories down that has a vegetarian menu. You have time to eat because your flight doesn't leave for an hour and a half. Or whether you're at a sporting event and it says you have 3 minutes to get your hot dog because the queue's going to get longer quickly. Or if you're shopping in a store, it'll give you more information. Or if you're taking a tour on a museum, it will help you augment your process. It'll be great. The point I'm making is these 2 philosophies, native messaging and if this, then that, those approaches plus the combination of beacons, understanding location awareness, and the learnings from those approaches, testing it now no matter what, and understanding how your world is going to plug into this, because this is going to happen, it will happen, and it's happening now, will help you understand your future awareness relative to people, the Internet of Things, and the messages received. All right, I'm almost done, and I know I'm almost out of time, but this is fun, and I'm sorry, Adam, I forgot my cat ears. So brainwave technology, by the way, this is the new cognitive interface. This is happening in small, none of this is kind of like, just rendered on a slide. It's actually happening now. I own the cat ears. They're at home. I forgot them. You can buy them on Amazon for $69.95, and you can actually move them with your brainwaves. You can actually play a video game with your brainwaves with Mastermind. It costs $299 as well. You can buy that online. But actually, brainwave application to Google Glass is new, and they're working on this project right now where you can focus and take a picture without doing anything else than that. That's actually in process right now. Gesture control is not new. We have this. If you have Xbox, you might have the Kinect technology, and they've been doing this for a while, being able to play games by using your motion. Gesture control for your PC and your mobile phone is new, whether that be Leap Motion or iTribe. I have iTribe at home. I've actually played Slice the Fruit Ninja game with my eye movements, and it's pretty addictive and pretty fun. And that is new. That came out at CES this year. You could probably start to see it in stores. Eye tracking research isn't new. We've been doing this for a while. This is a picture of search marketing. People use that to understand hotspots and where people click and where they don't, where they look and where they don't. But actually, eye tracking, like I said, for mobile is new with that Fruit Ninja game, and I've played that, and it's fun. And so the point in all of this that I'm going to close with is this. The messaging on the next billion devices will look very different than the messaging on the first billion devices. And the most underdeveloped asset format that I actually see today in this new and changing consumer ecosystem is audio, which is why I am here. And there are no standards or few standards in this new future, aside from what has come out, which I'm absolutely behind the development of, which is DAST from the IAB. And so marketers who master both native advertising creation and distribution approaches, as well as location message-based messaging, will be prepared to handle this rapidly developing world in areas like telematics, gamification, cognitive interface, and of course, in our world, driving in the car. So that is my speech. Now, one last thing I always have to say at the end of the speech, which is really important, is that you need to take care of yourself and exercise 6 out of the 7 days a week, because no one else is going to do that for you. So that's my public service message. So be good to yourself 6 days a week.
Hey, Cary, over here. It is just an honor to have you here today, and I mean, what an incredible vision of the future. Will you answer a few questions? You threw a lot of stuff at this room after that first cup of coffee, and I think got a lot of thoughts going on. I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions or want to dig a little bit deeper into some of these areas, let's give you that opportunity now before Cary leaves the stage. Any questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead. Ron? Yeah.
I can't see because it's quite bright.
Hang on. Well, he's about 11 o'clock to you.
You mentioned non-standard ad formats, and of course the 60 is the standard in radio. What do you think the trend is going to be there?
I don't know what the trend is in radio. Big thing. I'm not a radio expert by far, but if you look at the other channels who have gone before radio, I think that's going to be a really huge help. And talk about video for a second so that it compares. In the video marketplace, there was a lot of testing actually done by the OPA. I think it was around 2006 or 2007. They came out with a study that showed the comparison or the adjacency of length of content versus the ad itself. And so I liked that they did a lot of research around that, but it even took a long time after that, which was a little bit crazy for the industry to align against that early research. And so it had to do with the length of content itself that was being played. Little did they know that with all of the social sites, YouTube, Vine, that the actual content length wouldn't be standard anymore. That it was so really kind of a roundabout way saying there's going to be some standards which are really important to drive scale, and then there's going to be some non-standards always that are going to be almost algorithmically derived relative to the content length. That's my guess. But I don't know until there's some really rigorous testing in this environment when we get these messages to the new devices. Google Glass has the ability to do audio, for example, and so I'm not sure what that standard would be. I don't know what that length would be yet. I'm not sure what people's tolerance would be for that. So the answer is I don't know, but test, learn, scale is my answer.
Yeah. While we're talking about now, can you talk about adoption timeframes and adoption timeframes related to various demographics?
For
what?
okay, sure. I'll tell a story about search first to show you where that was, and then social, so we can learn, because each channel kind of adds on itself. So the search channel, I started, I was on Google's first advisory board, and the PhD agency was Daimler Chrysler, by the way, was one of my biggest clients, and so I had a lot of, and loved them, by the way. They were so easy to work with, the clients, and they were the easy ones. A lot of the other clients that I had were hard, trying to explain to them what a keyword was and why it had value. Somebody asked me, do new metrics matter? They kind of did at that point because people didn't understand. So that took a long time. That took probably 6 years, I would say, to be fair, to get Google to get scale. And I say Google, there was Yahoo and Bing, but really it was kind of Google. Yahoo was doing a good job too. And then social came on. Social came on, was at Team Detroit, trying to do social with Facebook. They also tried to do new metrics. I kept saying, stop creating new metrics. Let's try to get into the current ones we have. And so we fought about that. And so I said, well, actually Google was easier to work with because they kind of gave up and said, fine, it's the click, and we won't try to make it bigger than it is. And then with Facebook, they started to, they kept their current metrics, but they also started to go, okay, this is how we fold it into the media mix, the stuff you're already doing. And so they were a little quicker. And so then came mobile apps, even quicker. So it's getting quicker, but that's why I'm here talking, is because I'm trying to tell people that we're going to need to have both standards, which I'm not saying we're not going to have standards, but we're also going to have a philosophy of how we render things faster and how we might not always be able to lock everything up perfectly and then ship it. Lock and ship may not be our future. It won't be our future. We may have decomposed assets, and we might have to recompose them on the fly, which, by the way, is scary to creative people. Scary.
Well, speaking of which, and let's end it here, Cary, but I think everybody in this room, especially from the radio side, your grasp of how the technology connects with changing lifestyles and needs, and yet, with all of this technology around and all the interesting things that you are doing personally, broadcast radio is still part of your menu, part of your mix. What's your best piece of advice to the radio broadcasting people in the room about how they're going to stay in the game content-wise in the midst of all this technology?
Yeah, this is a great question. Last week I did a trial run of this presentation with Scott Brown and Adam. I don't know, Adam's here somewhere in the audience. There he is in the middle. And we talked about this, and I think the biggest challenge will be how to I don't know the word we use, but cut down so to make snippets of content. How do you get those things shipped? How do you put value on those pieces of assets? Because there's value to everything that's created. It's just how do you put that value? And then how do you technically ship it? I think if the question is, what's the biggest thing they can do, learn about what other channels have done in similar issues. That's usually why I talk about other channels, is so you can start to understand, that's cool, I didn't understand that maybe gaming is broadcasting in a way that they didn't before, and we talked about that. Gaming went, I have a bunch of, for the most part, I'm not, I'm generalizing a bit, but for the most part, I've got this big, huge audience that skews a bit male. Oh yeah, they probably like sports. There's this phenomenon of things called Monday Night Football. They gather around. It's very, social, or it's, or maybe they don't gather around, but they do know each other are watching it, and it's kind of a routine, and wow, but they're gamers too. So how could I come up with this thing called Twitch? People watching people play games, and would that work? And now we have contests, and we have tournaments on Twitch, and so they learned from some other channel, in this case it was broadcast in Monday Night Football, that wow, this kind of makes sense. And so learn from other channels of the things, their failures, their successes, and then try to apply it to what consumers are doing. Obviously put them in the center, but learn from other channels' mistakes, I would say, is the biggest thing. And then two things, and then the second thing is please look at the IAB standard, the DAS standard that just came out. Please lean in hard on that. Please understand what that means for the content that you are delivering digitally. Please, give feedback if you think something should change. I think it's still open for feedback. Adopt it as fast as you can, so that I can actually advertise within your channels, because I can only advertise if the pipes are connected at scale.
Cary Tilds, thank you very much for being here at DASH.